over 35 years of experience in facilities and construction.
In addition, he has been awarded the 2006 Lifetime Achievement Award in the Association for Learning Environments. He joined CFISD in 1997 and has designed and constructed over $25 billion in new construction and renovations for educational and support facilities.
He's currently overseeing the 6-year, $1.2 billion bond program that was passed by voters in May of 2014, and he's here to discuss the new bond program set in place and what the proceeds are for. And now to answer your questions, Mr. Roy Sprague Jr.
And just one quick housekeeping note, just make sure you guys raise your hands if you have a question, or whenever you get called on, make sure you identify yourself and what school so we know who's speaking. So whenever we're ready, first question. Don't be shy.
My name is Vincent Ruggiero, and I had a question about the recent school threat on Monday, because you obviously know how school shootings can affect the district. How does school threats affect what your decision making is in terms of what you put in place?
Great question. One of the things we are always concerned about is safety for our students and our staff. And in our $1.2 billion bond program that we just mentioned, that we passed in 2014, we included $55 million worth of renovations and improvements at our campuses. And the purpose of those improvements is to create additional layers so that if for some reason an intruder got into the building, that we can delay them and allow law enforcement to get in there and disengage the situation. Some of the things we included is the security vestibules. We actually did that before this last bond program because when we did the renovation for this campus back in 2007, we actually installed that security vestibule and had been doing that on some of our campuses. So what we included in this last bond program was to go ahead and finish out all the security vestibules. We've added an additional 40 cameras at our high school campuses, digital cameras. We were upgrading our old camera system from an analog system to a digital system so that we can have improved visibility as part of that. You've seen those little blue towers that are in front of your school, those emergency call towers. We added that. You see that at a lot of college campuses, and you don't really see it at a K-12 campus. And it was an idea that we came up with that we thought would just be another layer of helping security, so if somebody did see something going on, they could actually go hit the button there, and they'll be talking directly to our police department, and then they can engage the police services as needed based on the situation that we're dealing with. So we make that a very high priority. In fact, in our current bond proposal that we have that the board just called the bond election on Monday night, we have over $200 million of additional safety features and security initiatives that we're going to put district-wide to make sure we can ensure the safety of you guys. Great question. Quiet group today. Would y'all like me to tell you a little bit about our current bond program that we talked about, and that might help you get some questions for us. The board on Monday night just approved the calling of a bond election, and we had a committee of about 50 people from the community. We also had 4 students serving on that committee from various high schools, which was really eye-opening to have the students involved in that process and hearing their input and seeing what their needs are, that we could better serve you guys as we build buildings and renovate buildings as part of that. So the committee made a recommendation to the board on February 4th, and then the board called the election on Monday night and approved it, and it's for $1.762 billion. It's hard to say the B word. We've been so used to saying millions when we did all our previous bond programs, but to have a large bond program like this, we're trying to get used to saying that. We have lots of improvements included. We have, I believe, $207 or $208 million of security improvements that we're looking at, including at all our campuses. A big bulk of that is going to be for our elementary schools. You've probably gone through our elementary schools and are very familiar with the open concept that we've had there and not a lot of walls there. So one of the things we're going to be doing is looking at those open plans and how we can segment the walls and create pod areas so that if there was a situation where we had to create a lockdown situation, we can provide protection in each of those pod areas and not just be so wide open. So that's one of our big improvements that we want to incorporate at our elementary schools throughout the district. We're going to add some classroom phones at each of the classrooms. We're going to add some additional fencing around our portable buildings, again, to create just another security barrier and layer to help prevent something from happening on the campus through that. just like your homes and your parents have to replace the roof, have to replace the air conditioner from time to time, it's all part of that upkeep of owning your asset in your house. No different for us as a school district. You know, we have over 18 million square feet here in the district, and we have to maintain that over the course of the life of the building. And it requires us to replace the roofs from time to time, to replace caulking and repaint the building. Same things you would see happening at your house or some places of business out there. So that's a big bulk. It's about 55% of the bond proposal that's included for the asset protection in there. We also have technology upgrades. About $238 million is included in there to basically take the technology we've put in the last 5 years and refresh it. As you all know, technology is changing quickly, and you probably will not be keeping your laptop for 5 years, but that's what we use as a life cycle to try to maintain the affordability of the technology and provide you all with as much tools as we possibly can to better your educational career and learning process here. We'll have to do some infrastructure upgrades to support that with some of the expansion needs that we're doing in the bond program. Another big project we have included is our Performing Arts Center, which will actually serve our fine arts groups as well as our visual arts groups to go ahead and create a theater that will seat about 1,500 students for the bigger performance. So if any of y'all are in band or orchestra and symphony, you know how crowded it gets to have those concerts at the campus level. So we want to provide a facility that we can have more participation and have larger crowds there to support the district-wide events that we have. So we're real excited about that being on the proposal for consideration by our voters. Also, our district has grown tremendously over the years. We opened up our instructional support center back in 1993, and it used to be an old retail strip center that the district bought, and then we converted it to the administration building, our instructional support center. We have grown 200% in terms of employees since that building has been open, so we are very cramped for space. So we also included a new instructional support center as part of the proposal to be considered by the voters. So that's kind of a snapshot of some of the big things we're doing. We also have, I think it's about $88 million for transportation. We have to buy new buses for additional growth, so we have enough buses to handle the additional routes as we build new facilities in the district. And then we also have to replace buses, no different than your cars, and we talked about in the upkeep of your house. We have to replace buses on about a 12-year cycle. So we've included funds in there to be able to take care of those buses that will be coming up for age replacement during that 5-year period. And then we're also going to include a 6th transportation center that's going to be located just south of 290 between Mason Road and Meachby Road on property we recently purchased. And we'll locate the center there. And the reason is it allows us to get more efficient routing and minimize the amount of time you guys have to spend on the bus to and from school if you choose to ride the bus. So that's kind of a quick overview of what we've included in the bond program. So hopefully that'll help generate some more questions for you. Yes.
What's the process of like getting a bond started, trying to like get that process going of what you want to do with the money, where it comes from, how it affects the people, et cetera, et cetera? Like, how do you start that process?
Great question. One of the things we look at, this is my 6th bond program since I've been here in the district. Typically, we know we have additional needs as the buildings get older. We know we have to replace air conditioning roofs. So this past summer, we actually started the process for this current bond proposal. And we had teams of architects and engineers, as well as my facilities team and maintenance teams, go out and inspect every square foot of the district, and then develop a list of needs based on the conditions of the buildings. And then we also looked at the age of the various systems. So we looked at when we replaced the roof last, and typically it's got a 20-year life cycle. So we look and see, does that roof replacement fall within this 5-year program that we're looking at? Because this program will last through 2025. And so we identify those needs of systems that would have to be replaced based on their life cycle. In some cases, we can actually get a longer life out of it. If we can, then we'll hold off on replacing it until the next bond program. But most of the time, what we see, especially in the Houston area with the environmental conditions we deal with here in this market, we typically will have to replace a roof like in 20 years. So we make sure those systems and materials are included in the bond in terms of us reviewing and evaluating it. We present those needs to our committee that I mentioned to you before, and then that committee evaluates that, prioritizes that information, and then develops a recommendation for consideration by the voters. So in this case, they came up with a recommendation of $1.7 billion that was presented to the board. The board has called the election. So now the district will be communicating the facts about the bond program to all our voters and constituents out there, so they can make a good decision when they go to the polls on May 4th of whether they're going to support the bond program or not. Once the bond program passes, then we're able to legally start spending money. But what we have to do is we have to sell the bonds in order to get the revenue in to be able to pay for the new schools and the renovations. And so what we will probably be doing if this election passes, I should say when it passes in May, the first thing we're already planning for this is we're going to look at some of what we call the low-hanging fruit projects. We're going to actually look at trying to do some of the fencing that was included as part of the security improvements and try to get some of those improvements done this summer right away, so that the community as well as you guys will see some quick improvements as a result of the passing of the election. What we have to do, we have to sell bonds in order to get the revenues, and that's a lengthy process that our finance department has to go through. But they'll put together a bond sale, and we typically sell them in November. So when this bond passes, we'll be prepared to get ready to sell money in November, which will then give us the revenue to go ahead and start all the other big renovation projects and new construction projects that we have in the district to work with. And then that's how we use those funds, because it's a different than the tax rate that we have for maintenance and operations. So when your parents paying the property taxes out there, that's revenue that comes into the district, which includes the maintenance and operations, which covers all the operational costs of the district. It covers the teacher salaries, keeping the lights on, and all the other things we have to do. And then there's a separate part of the tax rate that covers what they call interest and sinking fund, which is like your parents' mortgage. And basically we pay back the money we borrow through those bond sales, through a regular payment, and we pay those bonds off. And there's a portion of the tax rate that is included in that, and that's how we get the revenue to pay for the projects that we do. And as we look at the bond program, one of the things we're doing right now is my team's working on how are we going to prioritize the $1.7 billion. Because one of the things we can't do is we can't just go sell $1.7 billion as soon as the bond election passes. It would really negatively impact the tax rate and the amount of money your parents would have to pay for taxes. So we spread that over the entire period of the bond program. So we'll do a bond sale pretty much every year for 5 to 6 years. And then we will prioritize those projects based on the dollars we sell every year. So for roughly, just say it's $1.8 billion, we'll be looking at selling about $300 million a year. So we'll be looking at all the list of needs that we have, and then we'll be working through our administration and prioritizing those as to which projects we do in the first year, second year, all the way through year 6. Hope that answered your question. I know it's a lot of information there. Yes.
Will the transportation money left in the freeze payment proceed on the levy?
Sorry, could you repeat that again?
Will the transportation money left in the freeze payment proceed on Wesley?
We will add additional buses due to growth. If we're running into situations where we have an overcrowded bus situation, our transportation looks at that, and in some cases we'll come in and add an additional bus to help with that route so we can reduce the number of students on the bus. So it's based on a per route basis, but it should help us with that in terms of the growth and the number of ridership that we have. Yes?
How do you ensure that newer schools are not taking advantage over older schools with the building? Because obviously they have different layouts, because as you go through trial and error, like you know what works better than others. So how do you ensure that newer schools have the best opportunity and the best layout without putting older schools and students who are there?
It's a great question. It's always a challenge for us as we design new buildings. Obviously, we're doing some of the newest and greatest things that we can do with buildings, and then we have all these older buildings that could be 30, 40, 50 years old and younger. And how do we upgrade those buildings to try to maintain the current standard? So when we do these bond programs, we look at the curriculum needs of the district and see if we have a building that's a smaller square footage than what our current standard is, and we will include money in the bond program to go ahead and upgrade that facility. In fact, back in 2007, we renovated this campus here and did a major addition and renovation. So I don't know if you've been here before the building was renovated. This building was built, I think, in 1979 or 80, I think it was, if I remember right. So it needed a big facelift. So we redid the front entry, we redid pretty much the majority of the inside of the building. some additional square footage to the campus and increase the number of classrooms. So one of the things we do try to do is make sure we have a quality of programs across the board, across all our high schools. We want to make sure everybody gets a good education no matter what their zip code is and where they live in Cypress Creek.
Is there ever a time where you plan for a budget deficit, or does it take you by surprise, and what actions do you take when it comes?
Great question. From a school district overall operation budget, we stay in tune with the state in the funding of school finances. Right now, there's a big issue with the state right now, and if you watch TV and watch some of the legislators, they're trying to push to try to do better on their financing, to get more funds for us available so that we can support you all better in the classroom to do that. So we have a group of folks in our district that stays close with our legislators, stays in touch with them, and tries to anticipate what may be coming about and seeing how that does affect our budget. We've had several years where we've actually had to have a deficit budget, and our board, the last few years, has had approved a deficit budget, in which what we do is we have a fund, what they call a fund balance. That's really our savings account, unlike your savings account that you might have. So when we need those extra funds, we can go to that fund balance and take it to cover those expenditures. We certainly, during a deficit budget year, we certainly look at our operational costs and see what we can and can't do to try to save dollars, because we want to maximize the dollars in the classroom for you all. I don't want to pay a bunch of money to the utility companies. I'd rather put those into the teachers and the tools and stuff that you guys need here in the classroom. So we always are looking for ways of how we can save money so that we can maximize the dollars for the classrooms and doing that. So it's something our teams look at, and we try to constantly monitor to minimize if we anticipate a deficit, what impact does that have, and where do we try to cut in our budget so that we can have a balanced budget and still maintain the services we provide to the students. Great questions.
So this school safety initiative is like a big thing in like Cypress and then just like in America in general and stuff. So do you feel as like one of the big dogs, I guess you could say, of like the CFISD board, like do you feel pressure to do everything you can to make like the school safer?
We don't feel pressure, we want to do it. And one thing CFISD has done for many years now is we've been ahead of the curve of most school districts, not only in the state of Texas, but in the nation in terms of the security enhancements we have been providing in our buildings. Back in the 2007 authorization, we actually started putting the card reader devices on some of the exterior doors, and that was really before we made a big push for security initiatives. We were just doing that internally and said we really need to start doing that. So as we renovated campuses, we came in and added those devices. We also knew we needed to consider doing security vesticles. So we were already doing security vesticles prior to the last bond program. So from our standpoint, we feel like we want to be the ones that sets the standard out there and making sure that we're doing the very best we can with the resources we have available to make sure we can protect you guys on a day in and day out basis.
This is just a small question, but are in all CFISD schools, they have a security vestibule?
Yes. And we're finishing up, we've got a few schools, well, not schools, but facilities, we're finishing up the security vesticles in support facilities right now. We did the campuses first, and then we're doing our support facilities last. And we're actually finishing up all our security cameras right now. We've completed all the high schools and middle schools. We're working on the elementary schools. We hope to have that completed within the next 30 to 60 days. And then we'll have all the items completed that we promised the voters in our 2014 related to security.
Yes, sir. Max Steele, Cypress High School. What would you say are some of the district's highest priority projects with this bond?
Security will certainly be the top priority, and we're going to look at doing as much as we can in the first phase of the project. We also have to look at the student enrollment in terms of student growth, and that's always a priority for us to make sure we have adequate facilities for the anticipated growth with all the development and construction you see around our district. So we have to monitor that, and every year we update our projections and constantly look at that to see if our target date for opening the school is correct. So we're really going to be looking at the new school facilities and the security as probably our top priorities, and then all the other stuff will be worked in between that over that 5-year period as we prioritize the projects. overseeing what, planning and construction?
Yeah.
We have a lot of projects going on in the district at any one time, and we have a fairly good-sized facility staff that manages those projects on a day-in, day-out basis. So we have a team in place that's in our facilities planning and construction department, and we manage those projects and working with our architects and our engineers as we go through the design and planning process, and then as we get into construction. And a lot of times those folks are actually working with the administration at the campus we're renovating to coordinate and figure out the best way to schedule the work so we can minimize the impact to the instructional time of you guys. Unfortunately, when we do construction projects, we have a tendency to find lines underground that we don't know exist, and we cut off the power, we cut off the water from time to time. We try to minimize that so it doesn't create a burden for you guys in your classrooms, so you can have a good quality instructional day. So we just work through the projects, we develop a project schedule, and we try to adhere to that. We work very closely with the campus administration to make sure that we're delivering a quality product and meeting the needs of you all while we're trying to meet the demands of the construction schedule that we have. Yes, sir.
How does construction planning differ from the public schools and like private schools?
Compared to private sector?
Same, like private schools.
It's no different. The process is pretty much still the same. We have different laws that we have to comply with as a public entity that the state requires us to do in terms of procuring contract services for construction projects. We actually have to do public bids and submit documentation out to bidders, and they will submit a bid back to us. We open those aloud, evaluate the proposals, and then make a recommendation to the board of trustees. So all I can do is recommend to the board who we would like to hire based on the numbers submitted. Then the board actually has to do the formal approval of awarding that construction contract. Once the board does that, then I'm able to start entering into a contract and then move forward with construction. Private schools do not have to typically work through a public board, so they have a little bit more flexibility in being able to go build a building than we do. We just fall under the state of Texas legislative requirements. Good question. Yes. Go ahead, I'll get you next. Sorry.
Avery Collins, Cypress High School. When you guys plan like different constructions for each school, is there a team for each school, or is there one big team that oversees everything?
We actually assign a project manager and a project coordinator from the CFISD facilities team. Then the architect team that works with us on the design side, they will typically have a project manager and several assistants working on the project. So each project basically gets a team assembled specific for that project. Now, some of our project managers will actually handle multiple projects. They usually can handle 4 to 5 projects at any one time. So you'll see that same person on multiple jobs, but there is a dedicated team per renovation or construction project that we do. And we do that intentionally because we want to make sure we have good quality control and that we're spending our taxpayer dollars wisely and getting the quality we expect for our projects.
Over from Cherokee Village, how do natural disasters and floods affect the way you design these schools?
That's a great question. In Harris County, we have to submit our plans to Harris County Flood Control. You probably heard that through all the flooding with Harvey and so forth. They have very specific requirements of how we deal storm drainage on the site and what do we have to do detention. So if you drive around the city, you'll see those holes in the ground. Those are typically called detention ponds. And the purpose of that is to basically retain the water, especially in those heavy rains, so it detains it before it gets into the public roadways. And then usually we put some type of device on there that controls the flow of that water going into the general public storm system to minimize the impact of the roadways and flooding, businesses and homes and so forth. So what we've seen since Hurricane Harvey is they have increased their requirements for us. And one of the things we've always done inside their IC is we try to make sure we're not buying property in the floodplain. That's the first thing. And if we do, we have to mitigate that site to get it above the floodplain, which costs some additional dollars. Sometimes we're limited with the sites we can purchase. If we can, we'll put the developer as a responsible party to do that as part of our sales agreement that when we purchase a piece of property. But we try to make sure and work with engineers to ensure that our finished floor elevation is higher than it really needs to be. We usually go a little bit higher than what's required as a minimum standard. And one of the good things, and I think the result of that is we only had one building and from Hurricane Harvey that flooded, that we had about 3 foot of very quickly after one of those disasters, so that we won't have damages there.
So, a large number of campuses still use portables, and I'm just wondering if that was due to the growth rate being ahead of construction, and if there was a way to eliminate the problem of too many portables.
Great question. We get hit with that all the time about portable buildings. It's one of those things that sometimes we'll see enrollment spikes for a very short period of time, and it may only be needed for a year or two versus coming in and building a brand new addition to add additional space there. So from a long-term standpoint, having portables gives us a lot of flexibility when we see those differentials in the enrollments from year to year at certain campuses. Ideally, we would not like to have to use portable buildings, but we do. It's a necessity of the district. But you're absolutely correct. The district grew at a pretty fast pace, and construction could not keep up with the growth rate that was going on in the district. There was one in those 2 years in a row. I don't remember the exact years. It might have been 06 or 07, somewhere around there. We actually saw a growth of about 7,500 students per year. And there is no way I can build a school quick enough to be able to meet those demands. So the way we supplement that is through the use of portables. Fortunately, we haven't had to build any portables in several years. So we actually have several surplus buildings that we just use for storage in our district right now until we have a need to put them at another campus. But that's been good news. So we're actually seeing a decline in the number of portables that are needed because we've been able to catch up with the growth. Now, because we're a larger district, our percentage growth is a little bit smaller than it used to be. We're only growing at about 1,000 to 1,500 students a year, and we're able to keep up with that pace with the new construction versus having to construct additional portables. If there is a spike, then we'll just take some of the surplus buildings and move them from one campus to another. Or if a campus enrollment declines and we don't need a portable there, we'll look at moving that building to another place that is actually seeing an increase in enrollment. Did I miss anybody over here? Raise your hand. Yes.
What is the reason for the bond amount increasing so much over the years? I know you said like it recently moved from millions to billions. What is the reason for the bond amount to increase each year, especially when it affects like tax dollars and things like that?
Great question, and the best answer I can give you right now is the district is getting larger and larger. We're the third largest school district in the state of Texas. And I mentioned earlier, we have 18 million square feet of infrastructure. You know, we'll be able to go and do renovations to buildings that cover the next 5 years, but as these systems age beyond that 5-year period, we have to get additional money to come in and upgrade those systems. So as our district gets bigger, unfortunately, the bond numbers are getting larger because of the pure amount of square footage we have to renovate and maintain in the district. And then on top of that, you have the growth that we're dealing with, and then certainly the initiatives of trying to create a more safe environment for our students and staff by increasing the amount of security provisions that we do in our buildings, certainly increase the dollar amount. As I mentioned, in the 2014 bond, we had $55 million in it. This bond program, I think we have about $208 million, so it's increasing almost 4 times because the needs are changing in the district. Our technology demand is getting greater and greater, so we have to keep up with replacing our equipment and also the infrastructure so that we can make sure we have the proper bandwidth to be able to support all the wireless devices and all the added technology that's added. A lot of our departments are getting more efficient by using more technology and software systems. That puts a demand onto our web and our infrastructure. So we have to constantly increase and create those additional capacity to allow us to be able to provide those services.
Yes. How has CFISD adapted its method into long-range planning for
We are always in a planning mode. Even with this bond program and what's been planned already, our team is already working behind the scenes to prepare for the next bond program. So we're always looking 5, 10, 15, 20 years out. We watch our enrollment numbers to see when we think we need new facilities and project when those buildings would be needed as part of that long-range plan. And then also we look at the age of the facility, the ages of the systems, as I mentioned before, and seeing when those need to be replaced based on their life cycle of how long that system is scheduled to last. they update that annually for us, and it's usually based on a piece of equipment, may have a 20-year life, but sometimes we get lanes out there, and no different in a car, and we wind up having to replace it a lot sooner than what its scheduled life would be. And so we are well aware of that every year, what those pieces of equipment are doing, so we can plan accordingly and be ready to include that in our next authorization. Great question. Yes?
Checking the local Village High School, with Jersey Village having the largest student population, are any portables planned for that campus?
Right now, we are getting ready to go through requests from the campuses. We actually submit out, a different department does this, but they'll submit a request to campuses whether there's a need for additional portables. The one thing that eventually there will be a high school 13 based on our enrollment projections, and that probably won't be available or needed till about 2026, which then would affect the boundaries for all our high schools, which would change some of the numbers around and hopefully reduce the number of students over there. But if the campus feels there is a need for portables there, they'll put the request in. We will evaluate that request, and if it's approved by the committee, then we would be adding additional portables at the campus. You're welcome.
When you said, with this new high school that it would change the boundaries, would that mean rezoning some of the schools?
That would be, but right now, the current projections is for our high school 13 is not part of this current bond proposal. It would be a future bond proposal. Right now, the current projections indicate that it might be needed by 2026. And that's all going to be dependent on all the growth and development around the area, how fast houses are built, and some of the vacant land out there gets developed, and whether it's developed into residential or whether it goes into commercial. You know, obviously, if there's more residential, we're going to have more students potentially coming to our school district, which will then drive that date moving up a little bit or be pushed back further. Yes.
Matthew with Cypress High School. So with this upcoming bond, how will tax work as students? I think we've seen like a lot of the benefits that came out of the previous bond, but how will the taxpayers and the average person be able to see it, and how can they relate that to the upcoming bond?
If you go around our district with some of the work we've done this past bond program in 3 schools in particular, Adam, Watkins Middle School, and Bain Elementary School, there were some of our oldest schools. In 2014, we had a number of dollars in there for renovation. And those 3 buildings have basically been completely renovated. If you've been to any one of them, you would see how well they look like. So our community gets to see a lot of the improvements that we do when we do a major renovation addition. Unfortunately, some of the renovations, when we have to replace a roof, the general public's really not going to see that. The only benefit is hopefully there's no water dripping on you in your classroom. And that's a successful installation because our goal is to keep the water out. Same thing with air conditioning. So there's a lot of behind the scenes systems that we have to upgrade that really people don't see, but it really impacts the environment that you guys learn in, and we want to make sure that you have a safe and quality learning environment. So it's our job to promote that, to let our community know where we're spending those dollars at, and letting them know where those dollars are being used at. Some of the older buildings might get more of a facelift than some of the newer buildings. So it's just part of our job to communicate that effectively to our constituents and our taxpayers out there. What? Yes.
Hi, Grace Schwaker, Cypress Creek High School. Besides expanding the amount of technology you have into the different campuses in CFISD and also upkeeping the amount of technology we have, will you introduce any new technological advances in the campuses or classrooms?
I think our technology department has evaluated some additional tools and equipment that could be utilized to further enhance the environment. I'm not the technology expert. I just help them with the bond. Let me check our list to see what they had included there, and I can answer your question. Okay. Some of the new initiatives is doing wireless displays in the classroom, some special education program needs, some lending devices for the libraries, and then putting some additional systems in our elementary large group areas at our elementary school campuses, and doing some language labs for the high schools, as well as you've seen in some of our new buildings, we've done these flexible learning spaces. And what they've included there is to bring more technology into those flexible spaces to be used by the students. I know it's a very general list, but I know they've got some more detailed initiatives underneath those headings that we have.
So, I just was wondering, during your time at CFISD, what do you think is the biggest change in needs of the district, like what they need more now than they did in the past?
That's a very good question. We've always had, in my 22 years here in the district, we've always had the challenge of growth and how do we keep up with growth. And we still see that. Right now, we're about 76% fully developed with the land area. So we still have a little bit more room to grow. And then how do we do that? You know, one of the challenges we have is finding property for these schools. Fortunately, we try to stay much ahead of that curve and anticipate if we have a school, you know, it's going to be like the high school 13 days I mentioned will be open in 2026. We just purchased the property for that. So that's well in advance of when that school would be needed because there's just not a lot of property available for us. So that is one of our biggest challenges right now. We're trying to locate a site right now on the southwest side of the district for an elementary school that's needed over there, but we've had a big challenge in trying to find a site that would work to be able to work with our boundaries to help out with that and how we would zone those schools to be able to release some of the overcrowding there, but just having an adequate size site to be able to build a comparable elementary school on it. Safety and security is the other issue that's been a big challenge over the last 4 or 5 years, but as I mentioned, we've tried to stay ahead of that curve. And one of the things we still look at is any new technologies available that can help increase those layers of protection so that we can ensure a safe environment for all. Yes.
Samantha Blocker from Cypress High School. So you mentioned there's a lot of new stuff with the police vehicles and radios and stuff. Has the board ever considered adding another station or campus for police officers?
Great question. In fact, that was some of the things that was discussed internally as well as with our committee and looking at options as to whether we do a substation or not. Our police officer, we actually have kind of a sort of a substation over at West Green, right there by Cypress Park High School. They're using some space within our transportation center. They really prefer to have that central location as much as possible to do that. So in this current bond program, we did not do anything to look at other stations. The decision was let's expand the existing police department. So that's what's been included. Somebody else? Raise your hand. Okay.
So, in your little bio here, it says that you were an architect for like a really long time and stuff. So when CFISD is like building another school, because I go to Bridgeland, so I'm like the new campus, you know. So when y'all build another school, do you try and like take in consideration things like what if a natural disaster happens? What if a shooting happens? What if the students need to get in and out? How does it flow? Things like that, etc.
Those are all the various things that we look at when we're working with the architects in terms of list of requirements that we give them to try to work out a design. Our team works very closely with the architects, and usually during the design phase, I will be involved with that to just oversee and make sure we're staying with the design direction that we want to head to. If you look at like Cypress Park, it's a different design completely than the Bridgeland High School. Some of the designs are done because of site limitations that we have. At the Bridgeland High School complex, we had a much smaller site to work with. So we actually had to go vertical and go 4 stories to be able to fit and meet our standard program. Cypress Park is a much wider and longer site, so we had a little bit more flexibility there, but we went to 3 stories there. Because when you start factoring in all the athletic fields we have to do at a high school, the parking requirements, the access for buses and everything, these sites get very, very tight to do that. But we certainly look at security, we look at the layout of the building. We actually involve some core principals to come in and review and evaluate our designs. We work very closely with our curriculum department to see what's changing in the curriculum side of things, and do we need to look at redesigning the classroom in a different way to make it more flexible and more effective for the curriculum that's being proposed at a campus to do that. So these are all factors that we do. We work with all the various support departments. We get input from the transportation department. So when we lay out a building site, we want to make sure that we have enough room for all the buses, what's the anticipated number of buses at a campus, so that we have enough driveway and stacking space for those buses. You know, one of the challenges we have at elementary schools is we always refer to as the mommy line. Is mom and dad like to drop their kids off and not be on the bus. So it creates a real challenge for us on the elementaries because the county does not like us to have stacking on the roadways around our site. So if you go to Woodard, and even as well as you see the very long drive we have there, that's actually been dictated by the county because they do not want us to have cars backing up on Mason Road over there. So we have to work that into our design and meet those requirements as well. We also have building codes we're responsible to comply with. We have the Harris County Fire Marshal. We have the International Building Code that we comply with for all the components to make sure those buildings are safe for exit. So if there is a fire, that you can safely exit the building in a safe manner. We also take into consideration the flooding. I think somebody else asked that question about the flooding earlier. We certainly look at that and look at the area where the building's going and making sure that we can hopefully minimize any effects to our building from a natural disaster.
In your career as COO, has there been any decision you've ever regretted?
We've made a few mistakes along the way, and a lot of times we think we will try a new product out that we think, oh, this is going to be the best product in the world, and we put it in, and it doesn't perform as good as we like it to, and so we just spent a bunch of money and made a mistake there, and then we need to go back and fix that. I've had a few of those along my career in thinking that we're making a good decision for a design or a product. And sometimes when we design the building, we go in there, we think this is going to work, and we go in there and say, oops, this didn't work the way we thought it was. And then unfortunately it's built, and then we have to try to figure out a solution down the road to solve that problem. So unfortunately, yes, I've got this right here by making a lot of those mistakes along the way. Yes?
I know that you started out in architecture and interior design, so what compelled you to join college education?
Great question. When I first got out, I graduated from LSU and got my architecture degree. I did schools, believe it or not, for the first 3.5 years of my career. And after doing schools, I didn't like doing schools anymore. So I went and moved around the country and actually got to work on some commercial projects, some high-rise buildings, some retail developments. And my real goal was to actually work for an owner, for a real estate developer. After traveling the country a little bit, we decided to move my family back here to Texas. And then I had the opportunity to go to work for one of my former clients, Spring ISD, and I was selected to be their supervisor of construction. So it gave me the ability to be on the owner side, which was ultimately what I wanted to do with my career. And then got back into schools, and 28 years later, I'm still doing schools.
Do you find it to be more rewarding?
Absolutely. I tell people I'm doing community service and I get paid to do it. It's a really great job. The most satisfaction I get is when we design a new building or complete a renovation and watch the kids come to that building for the first time and seeing the excitement and saying, you know, you built this for us, and yes, we did, and we want this to be a warm and inviting place for you to come and feel safe in so that you can be successful in your educational career and then do whatever you decide to do beyond your high school education. So yes, it is very rewarding. It's a challenge. The public sector is a little bit different to deal with because we have a board of trustees that we answer to, and we have to, comply and make them happy and satisfy their needs. And we're fortunate that our board of trustees has you guys in mind first. All their decisions they make every single day is what's best for kids, not some political agenda that they may have because they're trying to do something for their own career. They're in it for the right reason. Their heart is here, and to make sure we support our students. And that's what I love about the job, because I know what I'm doing has an impact on what you guys do every day, and hopefully the environments we create for you guys, they're inviting, and it makes you want to learn and be here at school and be active so you can be successful in your careers.
So, recently there was a thing where CFISD put like psychologists into schools, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So, is this bond gonna do anything with that side of the spectrum of having more psychology within a learning environment and that kind of thing?
The bonds are mainly for capital improvements. We cannot use bond dollars to actually hire staff.
Mm-hmm.
We recently added 2 behavioral intervention teams as part of our security measures and initiatives, because we firmly believe we want to try to prevent those incidents from occurring and not having to react to them if they do occur. So we're trying to put more, boots on the ground to be able to deal with those issues and any mental health issues that we can try to identify early on to hopefully prevent an incident like what happened in Santa Fe or Parkland. To do that. So, but that has to come out of what I referenced earlier is the maintenance and operation portion of the tax rate. And we're hoping the state will do some additional funding for schools this current session. And if there is, then the district will certainly be looking at that as a possibility to see where our needs are and whether we need to add any additional staffing to support that initiative. Is there a hand over here? Did I miss? I thought I saw somebody raise one.
I was just gonna ask, I obviously don't know because I've only been in high school for 3 years, but has police activity on campuses been increased in light of events of the past 20 years in regards to school shootings? Is there always been that much police activity on campus, or is that new?
I think, in my 22 years here at Cy-Fair, obviously our district has grown, so there's probably more incidents because of the larger population of students that we have in the district. Obviously, when I came here, all we had was a small security department, and mainly just help do certain things in the district. It's unfortunate in today's society we actually have to come in and fund a full-blown police department, but that's what's required to make sure we can make things safe for you guys. And when we started the police department, I think in 2011, and we've gone from, I've got the number of officers, 13, 14 officers to over 130 officers right now. So the district is very committed to making sure we put the investment in there to make things safe for you all. We now have, I think, 2 police officers at a high school. I think we have 1 at a middle school, and then we have police officers that patrol and are assigned to like 3 or 4 elementary schools and patrol around. So that's the current model that the district has. At some point, it's possible that we could have a police officer at every single campus, but a lot of that's going to depend on funding issues as well as what's just happening in our district and environment. Yes.
So what other factors, since we talked about public safety and natural disasters, influence what the budget will go towards?
Of course, we never can predict when a disaster is going to be there, and of course we have property insurance that we typically rely on. So like, for example, when we had the flood at Moore Elementary School, we had to use some other dollars that were earmarked for other projects, but fortunately we had some project savings that I could divert to go ahead and help take care of the renovations we had to do at Moore. And basically just rebuilt Moore. The only thing we didn't do is tear the exterior brick out. We actually raised the parking lot up to, we lowered the parking lot to where it became a detention area. We built a new detention facility on the site where the windows were going all the way to the floor slab. We actually raised those up to prevent some of the water, if it did flood, to minimize some of the water that would go into the building. That was some of the improvements outside of just doing all the flood mitigation and replacement we had to do at the campus. So that was a challenge, but what we do is we keep good records and we work with our property insurance company to get reimbursement for those expenses. And right now, if our negotiations go well, hopefully all we're going to have to pay is $100,000 for Moore Elementary, and then basically almost have a brand new building. In fact, that project came in about it's almost $16 million to do all that work. And if everything goes well with the insurance carriers, hopefully we only have to pay $100,000. But it does throw a curveball at us when it does happen, no doubt. Go ahead.
Will the bond help expand or improve class curriculum? If so, how?
We will be doing lots of renovations, and one of the components that we have is in the band and orchestra areas. We're going to be increasing space for those programs. We're also going to be increasing art labs at all our high schools. I think we're going to be adding 2 art labs at each of our high schools. So the programs are expanding. So we're trying to address the expansion of those needs of those various departments to do that. Normal classrooms, outside of maybe seeing new technology and maybe seeing some paint on the wall or carpet replacement or ceiling, existing classrooms, generally that's what will be happening through this bond program. Yes.
So where will the new facilities be built, and is the district thinking about selling any of the older facilities?
We are not looking at selling any of our older facilities. In fact, one of the options we looked at for our instructional support center was, should we sell that if we go build a new instructional support center elsewhere in the district. We evaluated that. We actually worked with our real estate brokers to try to evaluate what the sale price of that building would be. When we looked at it, we didn't feel we could get the value that we think the buildings were, so we felt it was in our best interest to just go ahead and renovate that building to alternative uses. So when we complete the instructional support center, when the bond passes, then we'll come into the existing instructional support center and do some renovations there and probably create some additional meeting space, as well as one of the things we have a great need for is we have a lack of storage, and so we'll probably use part of that building for storage. And that's going to be a much more cost-effective solution for us than for us to go build another brand new building to house those components. So we feel it's a much more cost-effective solution, not selling the building, but just going in and renovating and converting it to a different use.
We got time for a few more, so if anyone's been holding out, now's your time. Someone want to close this out? Somebody?
So I know that it's flooded more than once, right? A couple of times now. Does that affect how much money you get from the insurance companies, or how much they're willing to,
They basically insure the property, and they'll insure it to the value to replace it back to its original condition. So they will do that whether it's flooded once, twice, 3 times. What we can do, FEMA, on the federal side of things, they will allow districts that if you do some mitigation or try to do improvements like we did at Moore to help mitigate future floods, they would help with some of that reimbursement. The only problem with going for FEMA, there's lots of regulations and red tape tied to getting those dollars, and then when we look at the labor component of trying to put that documentation together to get reimbursement versus what we could actually get, does not really pay off very well. In fact, with Hurricane Ike, it took us over 7 years to get a reimbursement from FEMA on some of the damage we incurred when Hurricane Ike came through the Houston area. So it's a very difficult process, but that is an option that we have. And then more, we actually, because it was located in flood zone, we actually had flood insurance there. So we actually had property insurance plus the flood insurance, which really helped us out with that one.
So it's often said that like CFISD kind of cares more about the students than they care about the workers, care about themselves, and I think that's completely true. But how do you feel that like other districts that possibly don't work that way could change their system to kind of be more like ours?
Good question. I'm about to stump me on this one. I was waiting for one to get stumped here. We actually are considered a model district in the state. A lot of districts actually come to Cyfair to look at how we do things, our methodologies, our processes, and just our formula of what we do and great. A lot of it is the people we have. It's just that we're a very large district, but I'm amazed with me being here 22 years. When I first came here, we were at about 52,000 students. We're now 117,000 students, so I've seen the district more than double. But yet, we still have the same family culture atmosphere as a work environment. And it's amazing the support that any one of us gets from another employee, no matter what level you are in the organization. Whether you're a custodian or the COO or the superintendent of schools, people reach out and care about their employees. And that's what I think makes Cyfair so unique. And that's why when people come here, they don't want to leave. As Dr. Henry always says, this is a destination. And he loves it. He plans on retiring here whenever he decides to retire. I've been here 22 years, so I think if you looked at our history in our district and somebody did an analysis of the tenure, I would think Cyfair would have a much higher tenure statistic compared to other districts because of the environment and the support structure we provide for our employees, which hopefully reflects positively for you guys and helps you out.
Any final questions? All right, can we get a hand for Roy Sprague? Before we close it out, I'd like to just throw out there, because again, we're going to have our bond season coming up. I advise everyone, because you guys are the eyes and ears of your campus, to go to our homepage. We're going to have information on the coming bond. Again, so you can get more questions or get more answers to all your questions, get more research for what's going to be going on this spring. I want to toss to Leslie Francis, our assistant superintendent over communications, to sort of tell you about our role. Because again, you guys are the eyes and ears of your campus. We're the eyes and ears of our district, and she's the one who sort of helps lead the role of communication for our district as far as this coming bond season.
Thank you. Y'all had great questions today. I really enjoyed listening to them. I just wanted to tell you briefly, if you're 18 or over or going to be by May 4th, make sure you register to vote so you can vote in this bond election. As journalists, that's something you can definitely encourage all your classmates to go do also, is register to vote and actually go cast a vote in the bond election on May 4th or early voting. That's a real important part of this process. Another thing is we will be putting a lot of information on our website, and we already have real key information already there. If you go to the district homepage, there's a link on the little carousel slider at the very beginning that links to the press release from Monday night after the board vote. And there's also a link in there for more information from the Long Range Planning Committee's presentation on February 4th, which was last Monday. That details the entire recommendations. Y'all can read part by part. Mr. Sprague today talked on one of the 5 pieces of it, facilities, renovations, and additions. But there's actually 5 components of the bond election. So you may want to go do some homework and read that whole presentation. It'll be very interesting to you. There's also a video posted of it if you want to hear the speaker that went along with it from last Monday night. And then finally, between March 4th and May 3rd, we're going to be doing a lot of presentations out in the community, educating our parents and our voters what's in the bond election so that they can make an informed vote for themselves. All right, thank y'all.
Okay, and then last, we'll bring my co-editors back up. We have a gift for